does that look like from even like day-to-day operations where you're supporting training? If you got, a single seat fighter, crew that's going out there and they're just doing training and God forbid someone has to punch out. What does that look like from you guys launching to being able to find them to, if you had to go out and do a big blue water rescue, like just tell me like through the search and rescue piece where it's a non-threatening environment. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So for a permissive environment, we'll sit night fighter alert for our single seat or 2-seat with the Strike Eagles out here. Sometimes we'll support night fighter alert. And that is our standard support at Kadena. We have very competent professional partners with the JASDAF here. So they fly an H-60J, which is similar to a Pavehawk with an aerial refueling probe. They also have external tanks. So they have, a 4-hour kind of airborne time similar to the Pavehawk. And they handle daytime search and rescue in the Japanese territorial waters. So they do daytime SAR for any of our fast movers at Kadena. And then kind of with nighttime as our special skill set that we train to in a way other folks don't. We support night rescue. So any 18th wing asset, for instance, that flies at night, single seat, we're going to be on alert for that on an M+30. And it's all permissive environment, but we'll, at the step brief, or the show brief, we'll brief kind of the MOA or the area they'll be flying. And then we'll do an alert standards brief with our Guardian Angel crews. So our 2 pararescuemen that'll be on alert that night. But then we'll go fly our unit training program plan. So our whatever upgrades going on or whatever CT continuation training is going on, we'll fly that simultaneously, but we'll know where and when our jets are flying. So for instance, we executed a dry run with the F-35s recently. They simulated an unlucky jet, called it in through the right C2 channels, both to us and to the tower. And we were able to re-roll an airborne mission, come get our PJs, get gas, and then pivot straight to that area. And so then you're switching from, kind of your LARPing, your live action role play of whatever combat mission you're pretending you're on, your imaginary stack, and then you're switching to maybe the other side of the island or a different airspace, getting gas either from a airborne tanker, from the ramp at Kadena, which is a fuel truck. And then there's also a Marine base here, Futenma, that has Marines that just pop out of a hole in the ground and refuel your helicopter in minutes. It's really fast. Great contingency gas, and then press straight out. And then you work with the Guardian team to plan what kind of pickup they would want. And it's normally going to be one bird is going to mark the survivor with a persistent signal. The other is going to then support them either with an offset hover or in a circle pattern around them or something as they pick up the survivor. To find the survivor, right, we're going to F2, T2 their C cell, and our aircraft radio is able to find and interrogate that. But we can also home on beacons and use the wingman to keep eyes on to find them. But that critical locate piece is difficult. And even if you locate them, we have constant data that things move in the water, right? 1 mile in 15, 30 minutes, possibly if the tides are really strong. But you can see folks drift 5 kilometers in a matter of what feel like minutes airborne, but might be 30 minutes to an hour. And then maybe they'll get pushed back to where they were with coastal currents, and life rafts drift differently than people in the water, and also then a floating aircraft or something. So all of that floats and drifts differently. So even if they had initial eyes on, it might not be there. So we'd execute a search pattern in that case. And we integrate with the Coast Guard to get search data from them, which is a computer model program. So we'll have that printed for the expected drift currents, and the parachute's going to drift. So we're trying to locate them, but then it's just going to be a straight commit to a 70-foot, 100-foot hover send the hoist down with one PJ in the strop if the pilot's ambulatory, and then put them in the strop and pull them back up, barrelman with them in the PJ together. And then if it's significant injury or multiple survivors, we'll either fast rope or helo cast 10 feet, 10 knots over the water. Our pararescuemen will jump out. They'll swim to the survivor. We'll infill the second bird's pararescuemen. They'll prep them on a Stokes litter, and then we'll hoist them up to the aircraft.
Each helicopter carry 2 PJs. Is that like the normal?
That's the normal combat loadout. For a Civ SARS scenario, it could be just 2, but we'd still fly in a formation possibly for mutual support, hoist redundancy, and then we could possibly split that team, one on each aircraft, to work different patients. But for a training mission where we're integrating, we'll have 2 PJs or a crow and a PJ and 2 PJs on the other aircraft, so 2 and 2.
And they fast rope in the water versus...
So if we stay high, the engines won't get salt on them. And so you can actually salt out your engines and reduce your power margins so that you enter compressor stalls in a low hover over the ocean. And so for a fast, effective rescue, the last thing you want to do is fly over the horizon, open ocean, and then salt your engines out in the first 30 seconds of trying to rescue somebody. So if you can stay higher, it's better. So a fast rope, 30 feet, might mitigate a lot of that salt spray. Get your rescuemen into the water there, and then you can hoist them out. But if the winds and the salt spray is conducive, a helo cast, you can fly straight to the point. You might blow the life raft away, so that's a consideration too. But you can get pretty precise with that, put your team in, then pick up to a high hover and just basically offset so that the sound isn't drowning them out too bad. And you want to get them out of the rotor wash, obviously. There's nothing worse than being in the water under rotor wash and all the noise of the helicopter. So you offset, I don't know. From the
if I punched out, I guess I wouldn't care too much. I'd just be this would be the greatest sound on earth. The salting out your motors, I assume that's a known thing, you're assuming because you're probably seeing like an EGT rise, or I don't know if you guys.
Yep. So we write down our TGTs. We look at our TGTs at a given power setting, maybe 50% torque before we commit to below 100 feet, let's say in that case. And you see whatever temperature you're pulling, 680 or something. And then you look at if it rises after each iteration. You do a check on downwind and effect on each subsequent pattern. And then if it rises 20 degrees or 40 degrees, you have different kind of mitigators you take. And then you knock it off at a certain point, or switch aircraft real world if you can't knock it off.
Okay. And for those listening, EGT, I'm referencing that. I mean, I guess different planes use different things, but exhaust gas temperature, so you know what's pumping out there. And TGT, I guess, is turbine gas temperature.
Yeah, correct.
And that's
concept.
Just probably different makers or models. When you're like rolling back through, if you do something like that, are they ripping the motor apart each time to like look and do inspections, or is that like going through the bird bath and once you like wash it out, like, hey, we're good?
Yeah. So it's that basically. We'll go through the bird bath, then we'll do on our return flight, we'll do a hit check. So a health indicator check for the engine. If it passes that, then we'll go through the bird bath and we'll rinse the engine. So they just pump, clear water through the engine basically as we run the starter. And then we'll do that on both engines. We'll start the engines, we'll run it, and then shut it back down. But if we bust the hit check and the engines are not passing, they've degraded significantly, we will then wash it with soap. That's a pretty corrosive soap, and it cleans the blades with the salt on them off. And then we'll start back up, run it, then go do another health indicator check, and then it typically passes because you're washing that salt off. It's not necessarily degrading it in the way that sand will eat at the compressor blades or destroy the actual engine with friction. The salt is just like building up and can be washed off. So it's not damaging it. It's probably damaging it long term, and that soap isn't good for it corrosion wise, I don't think, but you can clean it and then go back on alert so they don't have to tear it down.
Yeah, this is basically a recruiting advertisement for becoming a helicopter pilot, I feel like. Go fly out overnight over the water and just a bunch of salt water. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. Fly back. Yeah, it's going to be great. No, dude, it's spicy stuff and it's impressive. And now these are like simple, benign questions, but to me, like, it's really interesting when you start breaking this down. And that I think, you take for granted not being a helicopter pilot, like, they just make it look easy. But like landing on a ship, it looks easy, but like there's so many variables that are going into it. Hovering at night over the water with like no discernible horizon. That sounds, I don't know if you can do it, but it sounds terrible to me. But I imagine there's situations you just think too, is like the swells of the ocean, right? And like how far you can actually see, but obviously the lower you get, you can't see as much. But I just imagine the swells, if you got a dude hanging out in a dinghy, like just finding them, it's a needle in a haystack. Now, granted, there's technology, and if everything's working right, you should be able to hone in on. But like one individual sitting in a dinghy or two in a dinghy, like that's in big open water, not an easy thing to find.
Right. That find, fix, track, target isn't a great acronym for this, but it is kind of the same process to F2T2 someone. And
you just don't want to finish them. Finishing is like picking them up.
You want to get them into the helicopter safely, right? But that is kind of the process we'll run. And it is just like critical to get, any location data on them. And for CivSAR stuff, like Garmin InReach and Shout Nano and systems like that provide like incredible fidelity with whatever satellite network it's using. And our folks are rescuing skiers up in Alaska within 30 minutes of notification in the backcountry within meters of the location they needed to be at.
Because, all right, correct me if I'm wrong. You, I imagine probably the ops desk, right? Like you guys don't have any tie-in to like Garmin InReach, but there's a rescue coordination center. There's one is Northcom, like down in Tyndall. I think it's back there now after the hurricane. But if there's some kind of civilian event that goes on, they have the ability to pull that data or get the information from the appropriate resources and then pump that to the squadrons.
Yeah, correct. So in CONUS, it's the AFRCC out of Florida. And so they have, they're 24/7. They have really high fidelity, and we would do missions in Zion National Park, for instance, out of Vegas. So their ops officer, their park ranger at Zion would say, hey, we need nighttime assets. Our contract helicopter can't support into nighttime, for instance, or the hoist isn't long enough. So they would then they would kind of call the squadron to notify them, but they would know AFRCC is the place to call. They'd call the Rescue Coordination Center, give them the data off either the cell phone hit or the Garmin InReach or whatever coordinates or information. AFRCC would give it a mission number and basically vet it as a civilian request for military assistance, pass it to local rescue units, whether it's Army or Air Force. And that same process works in Alaska with the PRCC there, or the Alaska Rescue Coordination Center. Well-oiled machines, similar to how JPRC would work in CENTCOM or a COCOM.